My name is Theodore Alden. I'm 72 years old, and I live alone in a house that once echoed with laughter, footsteps, and the soft rustle of love. My wife Marina died 5 years ago, and since then, this place has grown quiet. Not empty, never empty, because every room still holds a memory, but silent in the way that only a house built by two hearts can become when one of them stops beating. We moved into this house in 1976. It was smaller back then, just 2 bedrooms and a tiny kitchen. Over the years, as our fortunes changed and Gret was born, I added to it an upstairs bathroom, a sunroom for Marina's orchids, a porch that creaked just enough to remind us it was ours. I never hired contractors. My hands, steady, calloused, and proud, laid the bricks, drove the nails, sanded the floors. Marina used to call them her golden hands. She believed in me long before I believed in myself. These days, the house is too large for one man. I shuffle from room to room, sipping weak tea and avoiding the dining room because Marina's chair is still at the head of the table. I keep the bed made in our bedroom, even though I sleep with the door closed now. It feels wrong to disturb what's hers. Gret visits occasionally. She used to come every weekend after her mother died, but over the years, life crept in and pulled her away, husband, kids, a mortgage somewhere across town. Our conversations became shorter, more strained. I never asked for more. I understood. But nothing prepared me for the morning they arrived. It was a Tuesday in late October. The sky was overcast, the air smelled of damp leaves, and I was halfway through my crossword puzzle when I heard tires crunching on the gravel. I looked out the front window, expecting a delivery van or maybe the mailman. Instead, I saw Gret's minivan pulling into the driveway. The doors flung open one by one. Travis stepped up first, then Ben and Riley, dragging suitcases, backpacks, and what looked like a disassembled shelf. Gret climbed out last, holding a tote bag, her expression somewhere between nervous and apologetic. I opened the door just as they reached the porch. "Morning," I said, puzzled. "What's all this?" "Hey, Dad," Gret said, forcing a smile. I meant to call. "We had a burst pipe at the house. Total mess. We just need a place to crash for a little while." Travis didn't wait for my response. "Hope it's okay, Mr. Alden. We'll be out of your hair before you know it." Ben grunted as he dragged his suitcase over the threshold. Riley had earbuds in, already tuned out of the world. Within minutes, the house was full of voices, footsteps, noise, and the unmistakable feeling that my world was shifting under me. "I wish you'd called first," I said quietly, trailing Gret into the living room. "I didn't want to worry you," she replied. "It's just for a couple of weeks." "But Gret, Dad, please," she interrupted. "It's temporary. We'll stay out of your way." Temporary. That word rang in my ears for the rest of the day. By noon, Travis had claimed the master bedroom, the room Marina and I shared for 43 years. "You'll be more comfortable downstairs," he said, not asking but declaring as he tossed his duffel onto my side of the bed. "Easier on your knees." I stared at the bed, our bed, still made with Marina's quilt. "I can manage the stairs just fine." "Let's not be stubborn," he said, clapping me on the back. The guest room downstairs hadn't been used in years. It smelled like mothballs and old paint. The bed creaked under my weight. There was no closet, only a narrow dresser and a lamp that flickered when I turned it on. I spent the rest of the day watching my house transform. Gret rearranged the living room. Travis moved my books to make room for his gaming setup. Riley plugged her devices into every outlet in sight. Ben commandeered the garage for his drums. My framed photographs, Marina in the garden, Gret in her school uniform, me in my work overalls, were replaced with abstract art prints and motivational slogans. That evening, we had dinner, if you could call it that. Gret reheated takeout while Travis scrolled through his phone. No one said grace. No one asked how I was. I chewed slowly, looking at the plate Marina had chosen from our wedding registry, now chipped at the rim. Later, I sat in my new room, staring at the lamp, listening to footsteps above me. The house no longer felt like mine. It had become a hotel with permanent guests and a host who had lost his keys. That night, I opened the drawer beside the bed and pulled out the last birthday card Marina ever gave me. To my Teddy, it read in her loopy handwriting, You're still the strongest man I know." I ran my fingers over her words and felt tears sting the corners of my eyes. I wasn't strong anymore. I was displaced, disregarded, a stranger in my own home. And in that moment, something in me hardened. I didn't know what was coming next, but I knew this. I wasn't going to be forgotten quietly. Mornings used to be mine. Before Marina died, they were our quiet ritual. 2 mugs of black coffee, buttered toast, sometimes soft scrambled eggs with paprika, always eaten by the kitchen window with a view of the garden she loved so much. After she passed, I still kept that rhythm. It was lonely, sure, but it was mine. That changed quickly. Didek, Travis, my son-in-law, now suddenly rebranded with a new name to match his newfound authority, took over as if he'd bought the place. In less than 2 weeks, he wasn't just staying here, he was rebuilding it, piece by piece, from the foundation of my memories. And Gret let him. No, encouraged him. "You need a modern space," she said one morning as I watched Didek rip out the flower beds along the porch. The place was too dated. "It's good to freshen things up." "But that was Marina's garden," I said. "She's not here anymore," she replied, her voice quiet, but with no apology in it. "They said they were here, just for a bit." But their things were multiplying. A sleek espresso machine replaced my percolator. The bookshelf where Marina kept her mystery novels now held business books, Didek's framed diplomas, and, God help me, an autographed baseball. A television the size of a car had appeared one morning in the living room, and with it came a constant stream of sports, reality shows, and a volume of noise I couldn't escape. My recliner? Gone. Replaced with some angular Scandinavian sofa that felt like sitting on a cement bench. When I asked where the chair went, Ben shrugged. Mom said it was falling apart. He didn't even look up from his phone. They never discussed it with me. Decisions were made in whispers behind closed doors. Items vanished, rearranged, discarded. My things. My space. One evening, I opened the hall closet to get my raincoat. Inside, my photo albums, those heavy leather-bound volumes Marina had carefully assembled over the years, were missing. "Where are the albums?" I asked Gret, trying not to sound panicked. She looked up from her laptop. "Oh, Dad, they were falling apart. Didek scanned them all, digital safer. The paper was degrading." "Degrading?" I said, heart thudding. "Those albums are our family history. We've got backups on the cloud now," she said cheerfully. "You can look them up on your phone. I don't want my memories on a screen. I want the worn edges, the notes Marina scribbled in the margins, the faint scent of old paper and dried flowers tucked between pages." But to them, all of that was clutter. The refrigerator filled with foods I didn't recognize, almond yogurt, fermented cabbage, something called plant-based protein sticks. My bacon disappeared. So did my mustard. When I reached for milk one morning, I found oat slurry instead. "Oh, dairy's inflammatory," Gret explained as she sipped something green from a mason jar. "It's for your joints." No one asked what I wanted. The TV, once off limits during dinner, now blared sports every night. Riley FaceTimed at the table. Ben shoveled food in without a word. Gret gave me polite smiles between bites, but never asked how I was doing. Didek, sitting at the head of the table, held court like it was his family, his home. One night, he announced they were painting the kitchen. "That yellow is too bright," he said, wrinkling his nose. "That was Marina's favorite color," I replied, setting down my fork. "It's outdated," he said. "We're thinking gray with blue accents. Clean. Modern." I wanted to scream, but instead, I just stood and walked out. They weren't just repainting my house. They were repainting my life. That weekend, I returned from my usual morning walk to find my record player gone. The one I'd used every Sunday for decades to play Coltrane, Miles Davis, and a few of Marina's favorites. "Where is it?" I asked no one in particular. Ben answered from the couch, not looking up. "Mom said it's in the garage. Grandpa, you should get Spotify." I opened the garage and found the record player stacked on top of a box labeled Dad's Junk. Inside were my old journals, some war medals, and Marina's sewing kit. Junk. I took them out quietly, hid them in the small room I'd been pushed into. the one they now referred to as Dad's space, as if it were a guest room and not my home. Each night, I sat on the edge of that narrow bed and held Marina's last birthday card in my hands. To my teddy, it said, "You're still the strongest man I know." But I didn't feel strong. I felt erased. And the worst part? They weren't cruel. Not directly. Not one word of abuse. Not a slap or a shout. That would have been easier to fight. Instead, it was slow, suffocating dismissal. Quiet erasure. They treated me like a relic. Something to be dusted, stored, occasionally acknowledged, but no longer needed. I saw it in their eyes. They were getting comfortable without me. There is a particular kind of silence that settles when you are no longer wanted, not hostility, not even neglect, but a quiet fading out. The kind where your voice doesn't echo back anymore, where your presence is noted only as an inconvenience. That was the silence that filled the corners of my home. No, not mine. Not anymore. It was a Tuesday when I went looking for the photo albums. Marina had loved fall, the way the light cut through the golden trees like honey, and I remembered a picture of her taken in our backyard, raking leaves in her old denim coat. Her hair was caught in the wind, her smile wide and unguarded. I wanted to see that photo. Needed to. But the closet where the albums always sat, top shelf beside the old quilt box, was bare. No albums. Just extra yoga mats and board games. I checked the hallway credenza, the side table drawer, the linen closet. Nothing. I asked Gret. "Oh," she said, not even looking up from her phone. They were falling apart. Didex scanned them all. They're on the cloud now, so they're safe. Safe? I echoed. Yeah, you can just look at them on your tablet or the smart TV. We even backed them up. They weren't yours to scan. Or throw out, I said, my voice tightening. Where are the originals? I think Travis put them in the garage. Or maybe in the donation bin. Not sure. She was talking about my life. I found them later that afternoon, my entire past stuffed into a torn garbage bag in the corner of the garage, next to a box labeled Old Shoes. The photo albums were damp from condensation. Some of the pages stuck together. My father in uniform, Marina in her hospital bed holding newborn Gret, our first family Christmas, all crammed together like junk mail. I sat on the concrete floor and gently pried the pages apart, each one crackling like brittle skin. I felt sick. These weren't just pictures. They were proof that I had lived, that I had loved, that this house was built with laughter, loss, celebration, paying us. I carried the bag back into the house and into my room now, which had become a kind of exile chamber. And I laid the albums out on the desk, carefully pressing the pages flat with books and waiting for them to dry. I worked in silence for over an hour until the scent of old paper and dust filled the air like incense in a church. It was the first time I cried in months. The next day, I went looking for my records. I didn't want to lose them too. The living room stereo had already been replaced by some digital speaker that blinked and beeped like it belonged on a spaceship. When I asked Ben where my records went, he barely looked up. In the garage, I think. Grandpa, no one plays records anymore. I do, I said. He didn't respond. I found them stacked in boxes marked Dad's Old Junk. Junk. As if a first pressing of Kind of Blue and Marina's favorite Ella Fitzgerald albums meant nothing. I took them back to my room and slid the boxes under the bed like stolen treasure. Every day after that, I rescued what I could. My postcards from our travels to Europe, the handmade birthday cards from Gret when she was 5, the cigar box of receipts Marina and I kept for sentimental purchases, every object that still held weight and memory in my bones, I salvaged. It became a habit, a quiet ritual, like sneaking food into a prisoner's cell. One evening, I walked into the kitchen and saw Riley scrolling through her phone, legs crossed on the counter stool. I tried to start a conversation. "How's school, sweetheart?" She shrugged. "Fine. Anything interesting going on? Any favorite subjects?" "Not really." Her eyes never left her screen. "You know," I said gently, "your grandmother used to be a wonderful artist. She won an award in high school for her painting of the bay. I still have it. If you'd like to see, I'm good," she said quickly. "Thanks, Grandpa." And that was that. Ben was no more talkative. I once offered to help him prepare for his driving test. I've driven before, he said, eyes on his game controller. Besides, Didec's teaching me. It didn't matter what I offered. My stories, my experience, even my time, it all passed through them like air. I began staying in my room more. The living room no longer had space for me. My old chair was gone. My favorite books had been boxed. The TV always played something loud and mindless. Dinner time felt like sitting at a stranger's table, so I built something of my own. In the small room, I made a sanctuary. I hung Marina's little painting of the bay above the desk. I brought in my toolbox, even though no one asked me to fix anything anymore. I found the tiny hand-carved horse I'd whittled for Gret when she was 6 and set it on the windowsill. This room, this narrow, windowed sliver of space, became my vault. A museum of who I had been and who they had forgotten I still was. I lined the bottom drawers with letters Marina wrote me in college, brittle paper tied with old string. I placed the photograph of my parents on their wedding day beside my lamp. I kept Marina's cardigan on the chair. Her scent had faded, but the memory hadn't. Here, I was not obsolete. Here, I still belonged. Some nights, I sat by the window and watched the house glow with lights and laughter I was not part of. I could hear their music, their jokes, their conversations. Sometimes they mentioned me, usually as a logistical inconvenience. Dad's not using the garage anyway. He doesn't eat meat anymore, right? Is he asleep already? Other times, they didn't mention me at all. That hurt more. In the end, it wasn't one cruel act that broke me. It was this, that I was still here, breathing, remembering, feeling, and to them, I was already gone. There comes a point in a man's life where silence begins to rot. What starts as patience ferments into bitterness. And on that afternoon, as the sun strained through the curtains of my small room, I felt the first crack in my silence split wide open. I was dusting the edges of Marina's painting, the one piece of her still allowed to hang on a wall, when I heard a soft knock. It wasn't the kind of knock you ignore. It had a pause in it. A wait. Come in, I said. Riley stepped through the door, her arms folded tight, her expression oddly serious. The usual earbuds weren't dangling from her ears. No screen in hand. Just her. What is it, sweetheart? I asked, immediately uneasy. She hesitated. That wasn't like her. She wasn't the type to ask permission for anything, much less a conversation. I heard something, she said, her voice low. About you. I set the cloth down. Go on. They're sending you away, Grandpa. I blinked. Sending me where? To a home, she whispered. I said nothing, not because I didn't hear, but because I was trying to make sense of the word. Home. It used to mean here. It used to mean Marina, our oak floors, her rose-scented hand cream on the bathroom sink. But Riley didn't mean home. She meant a place where people go when others have decided they don't belong anymore. They made a deposit, she continued, rushing now. They've already talked to the place. Mom said it's a good facility, that it's better for everyone. I sat slowly on the edge of my bed. They want Travis's parents to move in here, she said. They need the space. So that was the final piece of the puzzle. The little rearrangements, the slow dispossession, the quiet retreat they'd pushed me into, they weren't the result of carelessness. They were preparation. Marina and I spent our lives building this place, brick by brick, memory by memory. And now they were preparing to clear me out like old wallpaper. Do they know you heard them? I asked. Riley shook her head. They thought I was asleep. You did the right thing telling me. I didn't want you to be surprised, she said. Her voice cracked slightly. It felt wrong. A long silence settled between us. I saw her differently in that moment, not as the distracted, screen-bound teenager who had ignored me for weeks, but as a girl caught in a web she didn't weave. I'm proud of you, I said finally. You showed courage. She swallowed and nodded. Are you okay? No, I said. But I will be. Riley lingered, then backed out of the room and closed the door behind her. I sat in the quiet and let the truth settle in. They weren't just nudging me aside anymore. They were evicting me from my own life. And not with malice, not even with a confrontation. They would simply wait until the right moment, and then, one morning, I would wake up with strangers packing my bags. The deposit was made. The plans were in motion. I was already halfway gone. My heart pounded in my ears. I couldn't remember the last time I'd been this angry. Not loud anger. Not the kind that shouts or slams doors. This was quiet, deep, coiled around my ribs like wire. They thought I would accept it. That I would go peacefully into that place, sit in a chair under fluorescent lights, talk about the weather with strangers while they turned my house into a nest for Travis's parents. Travis. The man who had taken my bedroom, my chair, my records, my garden. Now he was taking my home entirely. I stood up and walked to the mirror above the desk. The man staring back at me was not weak. His hands were worn, his shoulders stooped, yes, but there was still steel behind his eyes. A builder, a husband, a father. Not a burden, not a piece of furniture to be relocated. I'm not going, I whispered to the mirror. And for the first time in months, I believed my own voice. This wouldn't end in silence. Not anymore. They called it a family council. A harmless phrase, as if we were equals sitting at a round table to make thoughtful decisions together. But I already knew what it was. Riley's warning had changed everything. I'd spent the last 2 days pretending not to know what was coming, watching my daughter and her husband move through the house with smug certainty, Travis with his business calls and strutting entitlement, Gret with her polite distance and clipboard of next steps. The night they scheduled the meeting, I laid out my clothes carefully. I wore the same flannel shirt Marina had once patched at the elbow, my corduroy trousers, and the watch she gave me on our 40th anniversary. I shaved, combed my hair. If they were going to put me on trial, I would not arrive looking like the old man they'd painted me to be. After dinner, Gret called everyone into the living room. "Let's have a little chat," she said brightly, as if we were about to play board games. Travis sat with his ankle crossed over his knee in my old spot, my recliner long gone, replaced with something modern and angular, as sterile as his tone. Gret stood near the fireplace with a clipboard. Ben and Riley took the couch. I stood. They didn't offer me a seat. Gret began. "Dad, we want you to know this comes from a place of love." I didn't flinch. It's been difficult for all of us adjusting to the shared space. The house isn't really designed for so many people, and with everything going on, she glanced at Travis, who gave a supportive nod. "We feel it's time to talk seriously about next steps for your well-being." I looked at her, but I didn't speak. Travis jumped in. "We found a great place. Suncrest Hills. Clean, comfortable, state-of-the-art. You'd have your own room, meals, recreation, medical staff. You've already paid," I said. A flicker of surprise crossed Gret's face. "What? You made a deposit last week." Riley told me. They both stiffened. Travis recovered first. "It was just to hold your spot. No commitment." Gret nodded quickly. "We wanted to ease you into the idea." "Without telling me," I said. "Without asking." Gret's expression tightened. "Dad, be reasonable. You're not doing well here. You barely come out of your room. You've isolated yourself. And you nearly fell in the kitchen last year. I slipped on olive oil. Once. But what if next time it's worse?" she said sharply. "You're 72, Dad. You forget things. You don't cook anymore, you barely clean, and I'm not dead," I snapped. They all flinched. Even Ben looked up. "I'm still breathing. I remember everything. I built this house with my own hands. Every nail in the floorboards, every beam in the attic. I raised you here. I held your mother's hand as she died in the room your husband now sleeps in." Gret blinked hard. "I may be old. I may be tired. But I am not useless." "Dad, no," I said, raising my voice. "This isn't about safety. This is about space. You want Travis's parents to move in. You need me out of the way. Say it." The silence said it for them. "Be honest, for once," I added. Travis straightened. "Look, no one's trying to hurt you. But this house can't hold 3 generations comfortably. And we can't keep pretending your presence here isn't complicated." "Complicated," I repeated. "You need care. You need people your own age. You need a community. This place, it's not healthy for you anymore." Healthy. They used words like love, care, well-being, but what they really meant was burden, obstacle, and convenience. I looked at Ben, slouched on the couch, still barely listening. He wouldn't care if I vanished tomorrow. I looked at Riley, her guilt now blooming in her eyes. She couldn't save me, but at least she'd tried. And Gret, my daughter, looked tired. Tired of me. I see, I said after a long pause. If this is a vote, I'm already outnumbered. Dad, this isn't about votes, I agree, I said. The words hit the air like cold water. I'll go. Travis nodded. Gret looked relieved. Ben went back to his phone. But Riley stared at me, eyes wide with disbelief. I turned to leave. Before I did, I looked back. But know this, I said quietly, my voice hard. You're not sending me to peace. You're casting me out. And I won't forget it. I walked back to my room, one slow step at a time, not like a defeated man, but like one retreating to make plans. They thought they'd won, that I'd been cowed, folded, removed. But I'd only agreed to what they thought I couldn't resist, because they hadn't taken my name off the deed, and they had no idea what I was about to do. They didn't ask what I wanted to take. Travis showed up with 2 plastic storage tubs and a roll of masking tape. He moved like a man on a schedule, quick, efficient, careless. Gret followed behind him with a checklist in hand. Her words were soft and chirpy, the way nurses talk to sedated patients. Don't worry, Dad. It's not forever. It's just until things settle down. She never said whose life needed settling. It certainly wasn't mine. I sat on the edge of my narrow bed as they went through my things like archaeologists sorting through debris. My books were reduced to 3 titles. My clothes were sorted without me. The rest was labeled for donation or storage. I wasn't consulted. There was no conversation, just commentary. This is worn. He won't need this. This can go. Marina's cardigan didn't make the cut. Neither did my toolbox. I noticed how Travis would occasionally lift something, a framed photograph, an old wristwatch, my battered copy of Walden, and raise an eyebrow at Gret, who would either nod silently or turn away. It was a game of silent judgment. When he picked up the wooden model ship I had carved over the course of 3 winters, he grimaced. Dust Trup. I almost said something then. Almost. But I didn't. There was nothing I could say that would restore dignity in that moment. My legacy, my memories, the things that once defined me, they were being dismantled one object at a time, like clearing out a motel room after a short stay. By the time the boxes were taped and loaded, the room was stripped of personality. The painting of Marina had been wrapped in newspaper. My vinyl records left behind entirely. Riley had snuck in and taken the photo of Marina from my nightstand and slid it into the side pocket of my coat without a word. She didn't meet my eyes, but her hand lingered on my shoulder longer than usual. It was the only gesture of mercy that day. They didn't say goodbye to the house, but I did. As we stepped out to the car, I paused on the front steps. The breeze was cool. The air smelled of dust and dry grass. Across the lawn, the old oak still stood bare now, its golden leaves long fallen, but proud, stubborn, like me. I looked at the cracks in the sidewalk, the chipped paint on the porch rail, the uneven stones around the garden where Marina once knelt in the sun. I had memorized this landscape over a lifetime. Now I recorded it one last time, like a soldier about to leave familiar soil. Ready? Travis said, keys in hand. I didn't answer. I got in the car. Suncrest Hills was a misnomer. There were no hills. And no sun. Just a squat building the color of oatmeal, set back behind a withered lawn and a broken swing set that hadn't moved in years. Inside, the place smelled like boiled potatoes and bleach. The floors were linoleum, pale and stained from years of tired feet. A receptionist barely looked up as Travis signed the final paperwork. No one smiled. No one welcomed me. Room 114 was near the end of a long hallway, lit by flickering fluorescent bulbs. We passed half-open doors, men and women sitting in silence, some watching TV, some staring at nothing. No laughter. No music. No conversation. This wasn't a home. It was storage. Room 114 was narrow, with walls the color of wet plaster. A small single bed sat in the corner under a high, thin window that looked out at a rusted chain-link fence. A chair sat beside a radiator that hissed and coughed. The air was cold despite the noise of the heating system. The dresser drawers stuck when I pulled them. "This is cozy," Gret offered with a forced smile, as if trying to sell a hotel room she wouldn't stay in herself. "We'll bring more of your things soon," Travis said, placing the tub at the foot of the bed. "You can decorate however you like." I said nothing. They didn't linger. Gret kissed my cheek with the awkwardness of someone saying goodbye to a stranger on a bus. Travis offered a stiff handshake. Ben hadn't come. Riley waved from the hallway, eyes low. Then the door clicked shut behind them. Silence. It was the silence of a room that had never known joy. The silence of sterile design, of temporary arrangements, of forgotten corners in forgotten places. I stood in the center of the room for a long time. The photo of Marina was the first thing I unpacked. I placed it on the windowsill, where the light, such as it was, might find her face. Then I sat on the bed. The mattress creaked beneath my weight, hard and unfamiliar. I leaned forward, hands on my knees, and looked at the radiator. It wheezed again, then gave up entirely. Cold air seeped through the cracks in the window. I had never felt smaller. I had never felt more human, more discarded. But I was not broken. No, not yet. They had taken my house, my space, my things, but not me, and not my resolve. Because this wasn't the end of something. It was the beginning of my return. "You ever sell a house out from under someone who thought they owned it?" I asked. Ferris grinned around a spoonful of oatmeal. "No, but I've always wanted to." 3 days after that conversation, he made it happen. It was just past 5 in the evening when I received a folded piece of paper under my door. The handwriting was sharp, slanted. "Courtyard. 5:15. Come alone." At precisely 5:14, I walked through the rusted exit door near the laundry room and sat on our usual bench. The courtyard was empty except for a few distant shuffles behind closed windows. Suncrest Hills always quieted around dusk. Most of the residents were already sedated by routine or medication. A woman walked in through the rear staff entrance like she owned the place. Her coat was clean, her posture firm. She scanned the area and sat beside me without a word. "You're Theodore?" she asked. I nodded. "And you're Emma." "Ferris told me about the situation," she said, already flipping open a leather folder. He wasn't exaggerating. She was Ferris's niece, but I could already tell she was cut from a different cloth than the rest of the people I'd met in the last few months. She didn't speak in pity, didn't pat my hand, didn't lower her voice like I was breakable. She was all business. "First things first," she said. I checked the title. "The house is still in your name. No secondary owners. No transfer documents. Nothing tied to your daughter or her husband." I nodded. "That gives you all the leverage. They may be squatting emotionally, but legally, you own the land, the walls, the fixtures, everything." A strange mixture of power and grief bubbled up in my chest. It was my house. Still, no matter how many times they'd called it theirs. "You have the keys?" she asked. I took them out of my coat pocket, carefully wrapped in a handkerchief, always with me. The same set Marina and I had shared for decades. Front, back, and garage. Emma took one glance and nodded. "Perfect." She pulled out a thin phone. "We'll need to work quickly. Quietly. I'll set up private viewings. No listings, no signs, no open houses. Only serious buyers, people who understand what discretion means." "How do we get in?" "You tell me when the house is empty," she said. "Ferris told me your daughter works 2 days a week, and Travis has gone even more." I nodded. "Tuesdays and Thursdays. Gret leaves by 9, back by 3. Travis usually returns after 5. Good. That gives us a 2-hour window. Won't the neighbors talk?" Emma shook her head. "I'll pose as a home stager or a foundation inspector. They'll see a car in the driveway for an hour and think nothing of it. And what if someone finds out?" She looked me dead in the eye. "You're the owner, Theodore. No one can throw you out of your own property. You're not breaking in. You're letting us in." The logic was simple, blunt, and devastatingly true. I glanced down at the keys again. I remembered the first time I'd held them, how Marina had kissed my cheek outside the real estate office, beaming. We were young, scared, but proud. We had planted our feet on the world and claimed a piece of it. And now I was about to sell that same world out from under the people who had stolen it from me. Emma stood. "Here," she said, handing me a small phone. "Use this only for me. Never your main line. I'll text you a code word when I schedule a visit. You call me if plans change or if you notice anything suspicious." I turned the burner phone over in my hand. It was clean, lightweight, empowering in a strange way. "I haven't made a decision yet," I said. "Have to test her, have to test myself." She smirked. "Sure you have. You just haven't admitted it out loud." Then she was gone, vanishing back through the staff entrance as if she'd never been there. That night, I pulled the manila folder from beneath my bed. The deed was still clean, crisp, untouched by the hands of those who had reduced me to a guest in my own life. Theodore J. Alden, sole owner, it no longer felt like just a piece of paper. It felt like a key. Later, I joined Ferris under the humming rec room lights. He was pretending to do a crossword, but had filled the boxes with nonsense. "She's good, isn't she?" he asked without looking up. "She's fast," I said, "and fearless." "She's like her mother," he said, smiling faintly. "Sharp and loyal." "What if this doesn't work?" "It will," he said flatly. "You're not stealing something. You're taking back your life." He wasn't wrong. I had given up everything: space, pride, history, without a single raised voice. I'd been erased with politeness. Now it was my turn to write myself back into the story. For the first time in months, I felt like a man again. A man with a plan. A man with a key. Selling a house should feel like loss. But the day I handed over the keys, it felt like I had just stepped back into my life. The first buyers came and went, brisk and polite. They offered strong numbers, but their eyes were empty, glassy with calculations and design schemes. They saw potential, but no soul. They didn't ask questions about me. They never once said the word home. Emma kept her cool. "We can do better," she said flatly. And we did. It was a dull Thursday morning when she called. "Theodore," she said, her voice calm but energized. "I've got someone. He's different. Private buyer. Already in town for business. He wants to see the place." I told him the window's tight. He didn't blink. "He'll be there in an hour." I didn't need long to prepare. When we arrived, the house looked smaller than I remembered, but not because it had changed. Because I had. I was no longer standing beneath it as a man who'd been cast out. I was standing beside Emma, a quiet, confident shadow behind me, a witness to the past and the bearer of its future. The man who stepped out of the car was not what I expected. Timosh Rodek, mid-40s, clean boots, hands bare, a thick coat folded over his arm. He shook my hand without hesitation, holding my eyes for longer than necessary, not to intimidate, but to acknowledge. "I've read about this kind of story before," he said, "but it hits different when the man behind the door is still here." I wasn't sure how to respond, so I nodded. We walked the rooms in silence for a time. He didn't touch much, just looked. Measured. He admired the details, the slope of the ceiling, the way light came through the kitchen window at mid-morning, the visible seams in the oak flooring. "Tell me about this beam," he said in the den, running a hand along the wooden support. "I found it in an abandoned barn in Vermont," I said. "Cleaned it up, cut it to size myself. Marina didn't like it at first. Thought it was too dark. Grew on her eventually." Timosh gave a faint smile. "She sounds like someone who didn't give up easy." "She wasn't," I said softly. We paused at the back porch. The wind shook the branches of the old maple tree, which stood as proud as ever in the chilled air. "You planted that?" he asked. "The year my daughter was born. She lives here now?" I didn't answer. He turned back toward me. "You're not just selling a house, Mr. Alden. You're selling a story." I watched him, wary. "But I don't want to erase that story," he continued. "I want to honor it, build on it." He opened his folder, not aggressively, but openly. "I've been looking for a space like this. Quiet, grounded, historic. But I'm not just here to buy and renovate. I want you to stay." I blinked. He slid a page toward me. A sketch. A simple, tasteful rendering of a small guest cottage nestled along the rear of the property, just beneath the shadow of the maple tree. "I'd build this first," he said. "Full utilities. Private access. Wood stove. Covered porch. Your own space, still on your land. My land? He smiled. For now, until the papers are signed. And after. Still yours if you want it. In writing. I didn't speak. I felt the weight of the moment pressing down on my chest. It wasn't just generosity. It was respect. Emma stood nearby, watching us both. She said nothing, but I could see the approval in her eyes. She was seeing what I saw, not a buyer, but a redeemer. You do that? I asked. I believe in leaving a place better than I found it, Timosh said simply. And I believe men like you shouldn't be erased. The paperwork began that night. Emma worked without sleep, emailing, scanning, verifying signatures, and scheduling meetings. Timosh's team moved fast. Discreet. Within a week, the purchase agreement was finalized. Within 2, the funds were transferred. Not to Gret, not to Travis, to Theodore James Alden, now the full beneficiary of his own property sale and soon-to-be resident of the guest house he never imagined he'd live to see. At the closing table, Emma slid the last sheet across to me. All that's left is your signature. I took the pen, glanced at Timosh, who gave a silent nod and signed. Timosh signed next. The deed was filed. The house was his. But the land? My presence? Still mine. Ferris came to my room the next morning holding a bottle of cider. To the owner of his own damn life again, he said. We toasted over plastic cups. For the first time in years, I slept without clenching my fists. I had a new address, a new deal, a new ally, and a house, once stolen from me, was no longer my burden. It was my beginning. They never expected me to come back. Certainly not like this. Gret's social media had lit up all week with excitement. Photos of centerpieces, folded napkins, hashtags for #PupsTurned70. It was Travis's father's birthday, and they were hosting it, of course, in my house. No one had contacted me. No invitation. No courtesy call. As far as they were concerned, I was tucked away quietly somewhere, out of sight, out of mind. But they didn't know I had returned to the living, that I had moved from memory to motion. I dressed carefully that morning, polished shoes, black wool coat, Marina's watch on my wrist. I carried no suitcase, no speech, no weapons. Just a folder of documents tucked under my arm and the keys I had never given back. Timosh picked me up at exactly 2 p.m. sharp. His car was spotless. Inside, silence hung between us, not uncomfortable, but full of quiet certainty. We didn't need to talk. Everything that mattered had already been done. When we turned onto the street, my chest tightened. The house came into view. Balloons were tied to the porch railing. Laughter poured from open windows. Cars lined both sides of the road, leaving barely enough room to pass. Music spilled from speakers, some pop tune that clashed violently with the memory of Marina's favorite Sunday records. The house was dressed for celebration, but it didn't know yet that it was no longer theirs. I stepped out of the car and adjusted my coat. Want me to walk in first? Timosh asked. No, I said. I'm not hiding behind anyone today. We walked up the driveway together. Conversations died mid-sentence as we approached the front porch. Through the front window, I saw Gret, her hands full of serving trays, her face mid-laugh until she spotted me. The smile vanished. I opened the front door without knocking. It was like throwing a stone into a lake. The music stopped. The air changed. People turned. Gret stared, mouth slightly open. Dad? Travis appeared behind her, holding a beer and a plate of food. What the hell are you doing here? I stepped inside, slowly, letting the room see me, letting them all feel the weight of what they had done. I've come home, I said. This is not your home, Travis snapped, stepping forward. Isn't it? I turned to Timosh, who had entered behind me and now pulled a clean folder from his coat. I'd like to make an announcement, he said in a calm, steady voice. My name is Timosh Rodek. As of last week, I am the legal owner of this property, purchased directly from Mr. Theodore Alden. The deed has been transferred and registered with the state. I am now the sole owner of this house and this land. The silence was total. Then came the explosion. What? Gret cried. Dad, you sold it? Without telling us. You didn't ask when you moved in, I said quietly. You didn't ask when you took my bedroom, when you boxed up my memories, when you sent me away. You had no right. Travis shouted, stepping forward. You ambushed us. No, I replied. You erased me. You treated me like a burden to be moved, not a man with a history, a man with rights. His father, a man I had spoken to only twice in 20 years, stood off to the side, confused. Wait, what's going on? Gret ignored him. You blindsided us. You could have talked to us. We're family. Family doesn't evict their own father without warning, I said. Family doesn't ignore a man while living under the roof he built. She shook her head. We needed space for Travis's parents. You weren't happy there. We tried to. You didn't try, I interrupted, my voice sharp now. You decided. You managed me. And then you pushed me out. Travis stepped forward again. We have rights. You can't just throw us out. Timosh calmly opened the folder. Actually, we can. You never signed a lease. There's no rental agreement, no contract, and no legal standing for tenancy. In fact, allowing you to remain beyond the closing date is an act of generosity, not obligation. You're kicking us out? Gret gasped. You're being asked to leave, Timosh corrected. With 30 days' notice. More than fair. Travis was trembling with rage now. You think you've won, old man? You think this makes you the good guy? I don't need to win, I said, eyes steady. I just needed to stop losing. You're heartless, Gret said, tears in her voice now. You're not the man I grew up with. I turned to her. No, I said. I'm the man you left behind. The one you thought would quietly disappear. But I didn't. There was nothing left to say. The party guests stood frozen, unsure whether to sit or leave. The music didn't resume. Even Travis's parents looked embarrassed. My grandchildren lingered in the hallway, stunned. I turned toward the door. We'll send you the formal notice on Monday, Timosh added as we left. I suggest you begin making arrangements. Outside, the air was crisp and clean. The silence behind me wasn't just stunned, it was defeated. As we walked down the steps, I felt no triumph. Only peace. You all right? Timosh asked. I nodded slowly. For the first time in years, I said, I am. They fought like people who realized too late what they'd lost. Gret and Travis, furious, humiliated, tried everything to unravel the sale. They filed an emergency petition with the county clerk, hired a lawyer to claim elder manipulation. They even suggested I had been mentally unfit when I signed the deed over. It was ironic, really. They had treated me like I was nothing more than background furniture for months. An obstacle. A formality. Now, suddenly, I was central again, an old man whose mental state was only questioned after I did something they couldn't undo. But it was too late. Emma had handled every detail, notarized, witnessed, dated, reviewed. I had passed a medical examination just weeks prior. She had even recorded our conversations during the sale planning, always with my consent. Not to manipulate, but to protect. The judge's ruling came down quickly. The sale of the property from Theodore James Alden to Timosh Rodek is legally binding, final, and free of coercion. The complainants possess no legal standing to dispute the transaction. Gret didn't speak to me after that. Travis did once. He left a voicemail I didn't answer. It started with shouting, ended with a weak attempt at pity, and somewhere in between he claimed he only ever wanted to help me transition peacefully. Transition into what? A footnote? Their anger faded into silence. I didn't chase it. I had no time to look back. My new apartment overlooked the ocean. 3rd floor. 2 bedrooms, 1 for me, 1 for my piano. A long balcony curved around the building's edge, and each morning I watched the sun rise out of the water like it had just remembered how to shine. The landlord lived downstairs, an older woman named June who baked too much and insisted on calling me Mr. T. Every Friday, she knocked on my door with leftover muffins. I started to look forward to it. The apartment wasn't full of history. That was the beauty of it. It was clean, empty space. No ghosts. No stacked boxes. Just fresh air, quiet walls, and the sound of gulls riding the wind. I filled it slowly, carefully. I didn't want clutter. I wanted things that spoke to me. An old photograph of Marina on the mantel, a well-worn leather chair near the window, a telescope, and, eventually, my journals. I began to write again. Not just memories. Ideas. Lessons. Reflections. Things I'd never had time to think about when I was busy being displaced. I wrote about how easy it is to become invisible when you age, and how violent it feels when the people you love start acting like you're already gone. I also wrote about power. Quiet power. How it looks less like shouting and more like choosing when to speak. How I had been voiceless for so long, I forgot I still had a pen. And I had written my ending differently. I didn't abandon my family. I just redrew the lines. The money from the sale sat untouched for a week before I moved a portion into investment accounts. Emma helped me build a portfolio. Nothing wild. Steady. Secure. I used the rest to open savings funds for each of my grandchildren. Not because I owed it to them. Because I didn't want the bitterness of their parents to corrupt the future. Riley was the first to notice. She texted me quietly one day. "Was that from you?" I replied with a photo, her old drawing from when she was 7, folded in my wallet. She called me 10 minutes later. We talked for hours. She cried. I listened. Then I cried too. For all the years wasted. For the silence we let grow between us. For the things unsaid. She began visiting soon after. She loved the ocean. Said she felt like she could breathe there. We didn't talk much about Gret or Travis. We didn't need to. We talked about her college plans, her doubts, her dreams. She had Marina's eyes, shy, curious, observant. "I think I want to be a therapist," she said once. "I think you already are," I replied. One afternoon, she brought me a plant. "A peace lily," she said, placing it near the balcony. "It'll thrive out here." "Like you," she added, smiling. It bloomed a week later. The guest house was almost finished when Timosh invited me to visit the site. We stood beneath the same maple tree I had planted when Gret was born. Now its shadow stretched across fresh soil and new lumber. "I never thought I'd live to see this," I said. He smiled. "You didn't just live to see it, Theodore. You made it happen." And I had. Not through revenge. Not through violence. But through patience, courage, and the painful decision to stop begging for dignity and take it back. I wasn't just living again. I was choosing how. When I was younger, I used to think reinvention was for the young. Now I know better. It began on a quiet Tuesday morning, months after I'd moved into my seaside apartment. The mist still clung to the water, and the world hadn't yet fully woken. I was sipping black coffee on the balcony when I saw the way the morning light cut through the fog, touching everything with gold. I stood up, walked inside, and pulled out an old camera I hadn't touched in years. A week later, I enrolled in a photography course at the community center. It felt strange at first, walking into a classroom with people half my age, lugging my old Nikon while they flaunted sleek digital things. But I didn't care. The instructor, a man named Roy with thick glasses and a voice like sandpaper, didn't either. "You've got the eye," he told me. "Now use it." So I did. I began taking long walks with my camera, capturing titipools, seagulls in flight, the way the light shifted over the ocean in the late afternoon. I started printing them, framing a few. I gave one to Ferris, another to Riley. Even Emma got one. Her favorite was a close-up of rain slipping down a window pane. In that class, I met Eleanor, a widow like me. She had silver hair, quick eyes, and an easy laugh. She said things plainly and didn't try to fill silence for the sake of it. I liked that. We had coffee after class, then lunch, then more. She told me about her late husband, about their road trips, her love of poetry, and the garden she missed since moving into her apartment. I told her about Marina, and my fall, and the slow climb back up. We didn't rush anything, but something about Eleanor made me feel like the air was lighter when she was near. My doctor noticed the change before I did. "Your blood pressure's improved," he said. "Weight's more stable. You've been walking." "Walking," I said. "Breathing. Living." He smiled. "Whatever you're doing, keep doing it." And I did. The mornings were no longer battles. The nights no longer lonely. I slept better. Ate better. I really laughed for the first time in years. And when I looked in the mirror, I didn't see a discarded man. I saw someone still building. When the guest house was finished, I stood beneath the maple tree again and stared at the small, elegant cottage behind it. Just 2 rooms, a porch with a bench, a large window that overlooked the garden I once tended with Marina. Timosh handed me the keys. "It's yours now." I nodded. "Feels right." We hosted a small gathering the next weekend, just a few close friends. Ferris, Riley, Emma and her husband, Roy from the photo class. Even Eleanor came, bringing lemon tarts and a bottle of wine. There were no speeches, just quiet music, clinking glasses, and laughter under the trees. At one point, Riley pulled me aside. "You look different," she said. "Older." I teased. "No," she smiled. "Alive." I looked around, the place I had nearly been erased from. And now? Now it was mine again. Not the walls, not just the land, but the spirit of the place. The peace, the meaning. "I feel alive," I said. For the first time in a long time. The party ended with hugs and handshakes and a soft sunset settling over the yard. Later that night, I sat alone on the porch. The air smelled like cedar and lemon. The peace Lily Riley had given me swayed in the breeze beside my chair. I held my camera in my lap, and I thought, this is what it means to come home. Not just to a place, but to yourself.